that juice of bhakti, that ras that we talk about, sometimes it seems to flow, like we're just swimming in it. And then there's times, sadly, where it feels like it dries up. And what I've noticed in my life, and in the lives of so many people I've had the great blessing and privilege to be in conversation with, is that it dries up due to a few different things. And they're actually really quite simple things to take care of in our lives. Because the river of bhakti is still flowing. It's just that we stop feeling drenched in it. So it's not that we have to bring the river back. We just have to somehow get ourselves able to again drink, heaping mouthfuls of it. And the things that have kept me and so many of those I've worked with from that are being in a rush, being busy. When your mind is in 100 places, whether it's your kids, your spouse, or God, you tend to forget how much you love them. And it tends to become just business. It's like, eat your dinner, do your homework, who's going to pick up the laundry, who's going to take out the trash, and you forget, oh my God, I love these people so much. And the same thing happens with our relationship with God. The busier we get, the more in our minds we are, in our cerebral aspects, we are figuring things out, we are planning, we are checking items off of to-do lists. The world becomes sort of a task to be done. And in order to love, you've got to drop into the heart. And when we're busy and rushed, we're not in our hearts. And so to the extent that you can prevent yourself from getting so busy and rushed that you spend all day long in your head and you find it difficult to drop into your heart, you'll find that ras of bhakti there. Another thing that happens is we have expectations of God. And those expectations aren't always fulfilled. So maybe we are great devotees and we do our japa and we do our puja and we do our chanting and all of our prayers and everything. And then someone we love gets sick or dies, or we get fired from our job, or we go through a bad divorce, or our house burns down, or any one of innumerable things happens. And there's a sense inside us of, what's the point? God let me down. And so some of us take that in a, maybe God's not really there. Or, maybe God's not quite as nice as I thought God was. What's the point? And inevitably we find ourselves with, that distance. It's like, again, if a loved one, your best friend or your spouse or your child does something that hurts you, they lie to you or they disobey you or they, do something that feels like they've betrayed you in some way. Even if you still love them, you find it a lot more difficult to access that love. You look at them and you feel full of anger and disappointment and hurt, resentment. And the same thing happens with God. So we may sit down to engage in bhakti activities, but the mind may say, how dare you? You weren't there for me. So in that sense, the recognition and awareness that, as I always say, God isn't a vending machine, and that God just isn't there to give us what we want. God's not a genie in a bottle. We have these ideas that somehow a good connection with God is like the genie in the bottle, like whatever I need, I'm just gonna rub it, and I'm gonna get whatever I want because I got this good connection with God. But it's not like that. And so to the extent that we can deepen our relationship with God, from the idea of the one who gives me what I want, to the deep experience of a supreme reality, then we're going to find ourselves less disappointed when what we wanted to happen doesn't happen. We speak a lot in here about seasons, and seasons with crops and plants and trees, and seasons in which they're very plentiful and productive, and then seasons where the land is fallow, or the tree has lost not only its fruit but its leaves, and how all of that is really part of nature. And the same thing happens a lot on our spiritual path. And it's just really important to stay resilient and to know that even though you can't necessarily feel God so much at that time, that God was there. It's like that beautiful story I love of the man who has a dream one night, and he's a great devotee of God, and he wakes up from this dream and he cries out to God and he says, God, I had this awful dream. And in my dream, I saw my footsteps of my life along the beach. And throughout most of my life, throughout most of the path, I saw there were two sets of footprints, mine and yours, because you were always with me. But then there were these moments that were the toughest moments of my life. And in those moments, there was only one set of footprints. And how is it possible that you abandoned me in those times, like when I needed you most? Where did you go? How could you have disappeared on me when I needed you so much? And God says, my child, I didn't go anywhere. Those were the times I carried you. That's why there was only one set of footprints. And so in those times in our lives where we metaphorically feel like it's just one set of footprints, where is God? To see if we can reframe it and just understand that even though we may not see God, feel God the way that we're used to, like right here next to me, when we have the bird's eye view of our life, that becomes the time that we're able to see, oh yeah, I was actually being carried.